In the depths of a small hospital in Manila, capital of the Philippines, Miguel Reyes, a boy of only 8 years old, breathed with difficulty while staring at the white ceiling above his bed. The room was decorated with newspaper clippings and photographs of a man who, for Miguel, represented not just an idol but a symbol of hope. Manny Pacquiao, the pride of the Philippines, the world boxing champion who had emerged from poor streets to conquer the world. Miguel's mother, Sofia, worked as a nurse in the same hospital, doing double shifts to pay for her son's treatment, who had been diagnosed with terminal cancer that was rapidly advancing. In the few hours she had to rest, she would sit beside Miguel's bed, telling stories about the fighter who had overcome extreme poverty to become a world legend, stories that made the boy's eyes shine even through his pain. Among the medical equipment and the smell of antiseptic, Miguel kept a worn notebook where he drew scenes of fights, always with Pacquiao victorious, always with the belt raised above his head. It was his refuge, his small world where the disease didn't exist and where, for a few moments, he could imagine himself as strong as his hero. Dr. Santos, the pediatric oncologist responsible for the case, had informed Sofia the previous week that the treatment wasn't working as expected. With a shaky voice, he suggested they focus efforts on fulfilling the boy's last wishes, words that fell like stones on the already shattered heart of the mother. That afternoon, while changing Miguel's for, Sofia noticed a silent tear running down her son's face as he watched a small television interview with Pacquiao in his room. The champion was talking about his next fight, a few kilometers away, at the Grand Stadium in Manila, an event that Miguel knew he would never be able to attend, a dream as distant as the stars he could barely see through the hospital window. In his mansion located in one of Manila's most exclusive neighborhoods, Manny Pacquiao was finishing his morning training session. Drops of sweat ran down his concentrated face while his trainer shouted instructions about movement and speed. Even after so many years of glory and so many titles won, the fighter maintained the discipline that had transformed him into a legend, waking up before sunrise to run through the still empty streets of the city that adored him. His life was a stark contrast to his miserable childhood in General Santos City, where he slept in cardboard boxes and frequently went days without a complete meal. That hungry boy who sold cigarettes on the streets to help his family had transformed into the most celebrated man in the Philippines, a national symbol who transcended sport and personified the hope of an entire people. After training, his manager, Ricardo, approached with a cell phone in hand and a thoughtful expression. Hesitantly, he mentioned an email received from a doctor at a public hospital in Manila, something about a seriously ill boy whose greatest dream was to meet the champion. Normally, these requests were forwarded to the fighter's charity foundation, which would send autographed photos or video calls, but something in the description of this particular case had touched Ricardo. Manny wiped the sweat from his face with a towel while listening attentively to the details about Miguel, the boy who decorated his hospital room with newspaper clippings about his fights. The manager mentioned that the doctor had been clear about the prognosis. Miguel's time was running out quickly, a matter of weeks, perhaps days. For a moment, the fighter was silent, his eyes fixed on a distant point, as if he could see through the walls of the luxurious mansion to the small hospital bed, where a boy was fighting a battle much harder than any he had ever faced in the rings. Without saying a word, Manny walked to his schedule, checking the commitments planned for that crucial week before the big fight for the world title. San Lazaro Hospital was an old and worn-down building in downtown Manila, where doctors fought daily against the lack of resources and excess of patients. That morning, Sofia had arrived earlier for her shift, taking advantage to spend some extra moments with Miguel before obligations called her to other patients, other children, other mothers with tired eyes and fragile hopes. Miguel slept restlessly, his dreams interrupted by pains that not even medication could completely relieve. In recent weeks, he had lost so much weight that his bones protruded under his pale skin, and his hair, once black and shiny, had almost completely fallen out, leaving only sparse strands that Sofia lovingly arranged while watching him sleep. The hospital routine was suddenly interrupted when an unusual buzz began to spread through the corridors. Nurses whispered among themselves, patients pointed to their cell phones, and a different energy seemed to run through the place normally dominated by sadness and resignation. Sophia noticed the agitation but remained focused on adjusting Miguel's medication, carefully checking each droplet entering the fragile veins of her son. Dr. Santos entered the room with an expression that Sophia couldn't decipher, something between excitement and nervousness. In a low voice, so as not to wake Miguel, he informed her that something extraordinary was happening. Manny Pacquiao himself had appeared at the hospital reception, specifically asking for the boy in room 307. The news hit Sophia like lightning, making her heart race as she tried to process the information. The doctor quickly explained that the champion had arrived alone, dressed simply, without cameras or assistants, asking for discretion and requesting permission to visit the boy who, he had heard, was his great admirer. Sophia looked at her sleeping son, at the clippings on the walls, at the small pair of toy boxing gloves hanging on the headboard of the bed, and felt silent tears running down her exhausted face. Manny Pacquiao's silent steps through the hospital corridors created a sort of invisible procession. Staff and patients who recognized him maintained a respectful distance, some bringing their hands to their mouths in surprise, others making discreet signs of the cross, as if witnessing something sacred. The champion carried a simple package wrapped in brown paper, and his face, so often seen on televisions and posters throughout the country, expressed a contemplative seriousness. Upon reaching the door to room 307, Manny hesitated briefly, taking a moment to breathe deeply. He was no stranger to hospitals. His foundation regularly visited sick children, but something in this particular case deeply moved him. Perhaps it was the boy's age, so similar to his own son's, or perhaps it was the urgency of the situation, time running out quickly, like in the last seconds of a decisive round. When the door opened, Manny first encountered Sophia's gaze, that look he had seen so many times in his own mother during the years of extreme poverty, a mixture of pain, determination, and love that defied any adversity. She slightly bowed her head in a gesture of silent gratitude that said more than any word could express. Miguel was awake now, his large dark eyes initially confused by medication, but which widened in understanding when the familiar figure entered his field of vision. The boy tried to get up, an instinctive movement quickly prevented by the weakness of his own body and the tubes connecting him to the medical equipment. Time seemed to suspend itself in that small hospital room as Manny approached the bed, his package still in his hands, his gentle smile contrasting with the ferocity he displayed in the rings. Miguel looked at the champion as if contemplating an apparition, as if the hero had jumped directly from the newspaper clippings to materialize beside his bed, in a miracle as impossible as it was welcome in his last days of life. The gift that Manny brought was simple but loaded with meaning, a pair of boxing gloves used in his first world conquest, still with visible marks from the battle that had transformed him from challenger to champion. With careful gestures, he helped Miguel put on the enormous gloves that engulfed the boy's fragile arms, teaching him to correctly position his fists protected by the equipment that had touched glory. The afternoon transformed into an improvised lesson, where the world champion demonstrated basic movements that Miguel imitated in the best way his weakened body allowed. Manny narrated stories of his first fights, of the sacrifices, of the painful defeats that preceded the victories, speaking not as a celebrity to a fan, but as a friend sharing precious secrets. Sophia observed the scene with an overflowing heart, noticing how her son's paleness had given way to a flush of excitement, how his eyes shone with a life that medications and treatments couldn't awaken. Dr. Santos, who periodically passed by to check the patient's vital signs, discreetly commented that the numbers were surprisingly better, as if the champion's presence worked as a medicine that science couldn't formulate. When the sun began to set, casting golden shadows through the hospital window, Manny surprised everyone with an unexpected invitation. His fight for the world title would happen in 3 days, and he wanted Miguel by his side, not just as a spectator, but as part of his team, carrying the belts during his entrance into the ring before thousands of people and millions of viewers around the world. The proposal hung in the air like something impossible, a dream too big to fit in that hospital room. Dr. Santos immediately raised medical concerns, talking about the risks, about the need for equipment, about the fragility of Miguel's condition. But there was something in the look exchanged between the champion and the boy, a mutual understanding about the value of the remaining time, that silenced all practical arguments. The next 3 days were a race against time, a complex ballet of medical and logistical preparations. Manny mobilized his personal team, transforming a VIP area of the stadium into a mini infirmary equipped with everything Miguel might need. Doctors and nurses from San Lazaro Hospital volunteered to accompany the boy during the event, creating shifts to ensure constant supervision. Sophia could barely believe the transformation of her son. Miguel, who in previous weeks barely had energy to sit up in bed, now spent hours awake, drawing in his sketchbook a new series of images, himself alongside Pacquiao, both with arms raised in victory. Dr. Santos called it psychological remission, a phenomenon he had witnessed before, where the strength of the mind temporarily overcomes the limitations of the sick body. Social media exploded with the news that the champion had chosen a terminally ill boy to carry his belts. Journalists tried to obtain more information, fans sent gifts and messages of support to the hospital, and even international celebrities began to express themselves about the boxer's gesture. Manny, however, had given strict orders to maintain Miguel's privacy, refusing interviews and asking that the focus remain on the fight, not on what he considered simply the right thing to do. On the morning of the fight, a specially equipped ambulance stopped in front of San Lazaro Hospital. Miguel, wearing a personalized uniform with the colors of Team Pacquiao and his own name embroidered on the back, was carefully transferred to the vehicle with all his medical equipment. Sophia held his hand, divided between the fear of the risks and gratitude for the joy that illuminated her son's face. The journey to the stadium was made in convoy, with police escort clearing the way through Manila's congested streets. People on the sidewalks, recognizing the official vehicles of Team Pacquiao, waved enthusiastically, not knowing that, inside the air-conditioned ambulance, a little warrior was fighting his own battle much more important than any boxing match. The smart Araneta Coliseum, affectionately known by Filipinos as the Big Dome, was completely packed that historic night. 20,000 people waved flags, sang in chorus, and created an almost palpable energy in the dense air. In the specially adapted dressing room, Miguel received the final adjustments to his medical equipment, while Manny finished his warm-up a few meters away. The moment of entrance was approaching, and anxiety was visible on everyone's face. Sophia nervously adjusted the cap on her son's head, a last-minute gift from Pacquiao himself to cover the baldness caused by chemotherapy. The doctors checked for the 100th time the boy's oxygen levels and vital signs, divided between professional duty and the emotion of participating in that extraordinary moment. When the stadium lights dimmed and the first chords of Pacquiao's theme music began to play, a reverent silence fell over Miguel. His eyes, which had seen the same scene dozens of times on the small hospital television, now witnessed everything live. The lights, the roar of the crowd, the heat of expectations of an entire nation deposited on the shoulders of a single man. With a special wheelchair decorated with Filipino colors, Miguel was positioned at the entrance of the tunnel. Manny knelt in front of him, adjusting the 3 golden belts on the boy's lap, making sure the weight wasn't uncomfortable for the fragile body. In that brief moment, away from the cameras and the crowd's gaze, something passed between them, a silent communication between 2 fighters, each facing battles of very different natures, but equally significant. The signal was given, and the procession began to move toward the ring. First the security guards, then the trainers, then Miguel in his chair pushed by one of Pacquiao's assistants, and finally the champion himself, walking with the same humility that had characterized him since his first days in the sport. When they emerged from the tunnel, and the crowd saw the small boy carrying the golden belts that gleamed under the spotlights, a deafening roar took over the stadium, a wave of collective emotion that transcended sport. The fight was epic, like so many others in Pacquiao's legendary career. 12 rounds of pure boxing, refined technique mixed with the controlled aggressiveness that had made him famous. Miguel watched everything from the front row, his eyes never leaving the ring, his breathing accelerating along with the exchanged blows, as if each movement of the champion lent strength to his own fighting body. Sophia watched her son as much as the fight, amazed at the energy emanating from him, with a life that seemed to pulse stronger with each round. The doctors, initially tense, gradually relaxed as they noticed that Miguel's vital signs remained surprisingly stable, as if the emotion of the moment worked as a form of therapy that no medication could replicate. When the referee raised Pacquiao's arm, declaring him the winner by unanimous decision, the stadium exploded in a frenzied celebration. Filipinos of all social classes, united by that moment of national pride, hugged each other and shouted the champion's name. Manny, as he always did after his victories, knelt in a corner of the ring in silent prayer before any celebration. The most touching moment of the night, the one that would be shared millions of times on social media and would stamp the newspaper covers the next day, happened when Pacquiao, still breathless and sweaty, came down from the ring and walked directly to Miguel. With a gesture that mixed respect and affection, the champion removed his own gloves and placed them in the boy's small hands, before raising his arms as if announcing a new winner, a champion of another category. The post-fight interview, normally focused on technical aspects and the next title defense, transformed into something completely different when Manny, with Miguel at his side, announced the creation of a special wing at San Lazaro Hospital dedicated to treating children with cancer, fully financed by him. With a voice filled with emotion, the champion explained that he had learned more about courage in the 3 days alongside that boy than in all his years of professional career. The weeks following the great fight brought significant changes for everyone involved. San Lazaro Hospital became the center of an unprecedented wave of solidarity, with donations arriving from all over the world to complement Pacquiao's initial investment. Specialist doctors offered to work voluntarily, pharmaceutical companies sent experimental medications, and even the Filipino government, frequently criticized for neglecting public health, announced a special support program. Miguel, against all medical expectations, experienced an improvement that left specialists perplexed. Although his cancer remained present, the symptoms had significantly decreased, allowing him moments of normality that seemed impossible just a month before. Dr. Santos used terms like partial remission and unexpected response to treatment, but Sophia, in her mother's heart, attributed the change to something deeper, something that science still couldn't adequately measure. Manny Pacquiao visited the hospital regularly, always without prior announcements, always avoiding the press. He brought not only gifts for Miguel but also for the other children in the pediatric oncology ward, spending hours telling stories, demonstrating boxing movements adapted for small fragile bodies, listening to dreams and fears with the same attention he dedicated to his trainer's advice before big fights. A special connection had formed between the champion and the boy, something that transcended the relationship between idol and fan. Manny began to include Miguel in his light training sessions, adapting exercises that the boy could perform from his wheelchair, celebrating each small physical victory as if it were a world title. The doctors, initially skeptical, ended up incorporating some of these exercises into the treatment protocol, noticing tangible benefits in Miguel's mobility and general condition. The story had spread far beyond the Philippines, touching hearts around the world. Personalities from sports, music, and cinema publicly expressed themselves, some visiting the hospital, others sending messages of support. A famous documentary production company had started filming a feature about the friendship between the champion and the boy, with all royalties directed to the new foundation established in Miguel's name to support children with cancer in developing countries. 6 months after the historic night at Smart Araneta Coliseum, the new wing of San Lazaro Hospital was officially inaugurated. The modern building contrasted with the old facilities of the rest of the hospital, its wide and luminous corridors decorated with photographs of smiling children and inspirational phrases in Tagalog and English. At the main entrance, a golden plaque displayed the official name, Miguel Reyes Wing, where fighters never give up. The inauguration ceremony was simple, respecting Sophia and Manny's wish to keep the focus on the children who would benefit, not on the publicity aspects of the event. Government authorities, doctors, nurses, and patients' families gathered in the new therapeutic garden, specifically designed to allow children in treatment to enjoy the outdoors in a controlled and safe environment. Miguel cut the inaugural ribbon sitting in his new sports wheelchair, a gift from a famous Paralympic athlete who had been inspired by his story. His hair had begun to grow again, still thin but present, and his face, although still marked by the disease, exhibited a vitality that reflected his continuous fight. By his side, Manny Pacquiao remained in the background, determined to ensure that moment belonged entirely to the true champion of the day. Most surprising to all present was Miguel's improvised speech. With a weak but determined voice, the boy thanked everyone who had contributed to making that dream a reality, speaking not only in his own name but representing all children who faced similar battles in hospitals around the world. His simple words about hope and perseverance made many adults discreetly wipe away tears, including Pacquiao himself, known for his emotional firmness. After the official ceremony, while the guests visited the new facilities, Manny and Miguel retreated for a private moment in the therapeutic garden. There, away from gazes and cameras, the world champion removed from a small box a special gift, a miniature replica of the champion belt, personalized with Miguel's name and the inscription, "Undisputed Champion of Life." The boy held the gleaming object with reverence, his eyes shining with a deep emotion that words could not adequately express. Sophia observed the scene from a distance, her heart overflowing with gratitude. The doctors still couldn't promise a complete cure for her son. The road ahead would still be long and difficult, filled with painful treatments and uncertainties. But something fundamental had changed. Miguel was no longer just surviving. He was living each day fully, inspiring others and being inspired, connected to a greater purpose that transformed his personal struggle into a testimony of hope for countless other families. A year passed since the first meeting between Manny Pacquiao and Miguel in the small hospital room. Seasons changed, bringing monsoons and periods of drought, but the friendship between the world champion and the boy remained constant, deepening with time and shared circumstances. What had begun as a gesture of kindness had transformed into a genuine bond that transcended differences in age, social status, and life experiences. The experimental treatment that Miguel had received as part of the Foundation's new program had produced promising results. The main tumor had significantly decreased, and although the cancer hadn't completely disappeared, doctors now spoke in terms of disease control instead of palliative care. Dr. Santos, always cautious in his statements, admitted in private conversations with Sophia that her son's case was defying statistics and medical expectations. Miguel's life had expanded far beyond the hospital walls. 3 times a week, he attended special classes adapted to his needs, living with other children and recovering part of the childhood that the disease had stolen. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, he participated in physiotherapy sessions at Pacquiao's training center, sharing the space with professional athletes who treated him as a respected colleague, not as a patient. Manny had integrated the boy into his routine in a natural way, presenting him as part of his inspiration team. During his international travels for fights or official commitments, he maintained regular video calls with Miguel, discussing boxing strategies as if the boy were a real assistant coach. When he was in the Philippines, he reserved at least 1 day a week for activities with him, from visits to other hospitals to simple walks in the park, always protecting his privacy from media harassment. Sophia witnessed this transformation with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. The nurse who previously fought alone against a precarious health system now coordinated a support program for families in similar situations, using her personal experience to guide other parents through the emotional and bureaucratic labyrinth of childhood cancer. Her life remained difficult. Concerns about her son's health would never completely disappear, but she was no longer alone in the battle. The Great International Conference on Childhood Cancer in Manila attracted specialists from around the world, transforming the Philippine capital into a center for discussions about the most recent advances in treating the disease. San Lazaro Hospital, previously a modest institution rarely mentioned in academic circles, now hosted the main event in its new auditorium, financed by the Pacquiao Foundation. Among the guests of honor were Miguel and Sofia, their special badges indicating their status not just as patient and family member, but as speakers. Their story had transformed into a case study about the impact of psychosocial factors in cancer treatment, with doctors from various specialties recognizing that what had happened with Miguel couldn't be explained only by traditional science. During the 3 days of the event, medical personalities from around the world visited the specialized wing that bore the boy's name, observing with interest the innovative protocols that combined Western medicine, complementary therapies, and Filipino cultural elements. The model was being replicated in other developing countries, adapted to local realities, but maintaining the fundamental principle of treating the patient as a whole person, not just as a set of symptoms. On the closing night of the conference, the smart Araneta Coliseum, the same that had witnessed Pacquiao's historic fight a year before, transformed into the stage for a benefit event broadcast live to more than 50 countries. In the center of the ring, transformed into a stage for the occasion, Manny and Miguel sat in simple armchairs, conversing naturally about their shared journey, while a famous moderator occasionally directed the discussion. The simplicity of the format contrasted with the depth of the shared stories. Manny talking about how his perspective on life and career had changed after meeting Miguel, the boy describing how friendship with the champion had given him a purpose that went beyond his own survival. There were no rehearsed scripts, just two friends sharing truths that resonated with millions of viewers around the world. The most impactful moment of the night occurred when Miguel, in response to a question about his dreams for the future, announced his intention to study medicine when he grew up. With a wisdom that transcended his age, he explained that his experience as a patient had shown him the importance of doctors who saw beyond the disease, who treated people, not just symptoms. At that moment, the circle seemed to complete itself. The boy who had been saved now dreamed of saving others. 5 years passed since that first visit of Manny Pacquiao to San Lazaro Hospital. Time brought many changes. The champion finally retired from the rings to dedicate himself fully to politics and his charitable foundations. Dr. Santos became the director of an international research program on childhood cancer. Sofia completed her specialization in oncology nursing and now led the team in the wing that bore her son's name. Miguel Reyes, at 13 years old, lived a reality that once seemed impossible. His cancer had been in complete remission for 2 years, a word that his mother still pronounced with almost religious reverence. He regularly attended school, participated in the science club, and, although he couldn't practice competitive sports due to the sequelae of the disease in his cardiovascular system, he had found his passion in helping to train younger children in a recreational boxing program for recovering patients. The friendship between him and Manny Pacquiao remained strong, adapting to the changes in their lives. The boy who previously couldn't leave the hospital now regularly visited the ex-champion's house, spending weekends with the Pacquiao family, being treated like an older brother by the boxer's children. The life lessons they shared went far beyond boxing. They were about perseverance, humility, and the importance of giving back. Their story had inspired similar initiatives in other countries, with famous athletes creating significant connections with children facing serious illnesses. An award-winning documentarian had captured the 5-year journey in a film that was now used as an educational tool in medical schools around the world, teaching future doctors about the power of hope and human connection in the healing process. On a quiet Sunday afternoon in Manila, as the city slowed its frantic pace, Manny and Miguel walked side by side through the park near the hospital where everything had begun. The boy, now almost a teenager, moved with an energy that contrasted with the memories of the days when he needed a wheelchair. They talked about Miguel's future plans for medical school, about Pacquiao's new legislative project to improve the Filipino health system. In that simple moment, far from the spotlights and crowds, resided the essence of the transformation both had experienced. A world champion who had found a purpose greater than any belt or title. A boy who had conquered not just the disease, but fear and hopelessness. Two fighters from completely different worlds, united by an act of compassion that had grown far beyond that first encounter in a hospital room. As the sun set over Manila Bay, casting golden tones over the city they both loved, Miguel looked at his mentor and friend with eyes that had seen more pain and joy than most people experience in an entire lifetime. They didn't need words to communicate the gratitude and mutual respect they felt. In the quietness of that moment was the truth that their lives now represented for millions of people around the world. That true strength isn't in muscles or titles, but in the capacity to extend a hand and change someone's story, one heart at a time. If you like this kind of story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next videos.